Thanks for joining us. I'm Mark Crutcher, president of Life Dynamics, and I'm joined by my lovely assistant, Renee Hobbs. Hello, Renee.
Hello.
Well, just recently, in the last week or so, California Department of Justice raided the home of David Daleiden, who did the Planned Parenthood videos following up on our investigation earlier. Here's the most amazing part of this deal. 11 agents of the California Department of Justice raided his home. 11 agents.
It's a lot of agents.
In a state with a very high crime rate,
Right.
they can free up 11 agents.
To do this.
Yeah, to go to his apartment to get a couple of DVDs and some recording equipment.
Right. Computers, yeah.
Computers and stuff.
Right.
It's mind-boggling.
Right. And the reason
is California Attorney General Kamala Harris is running for the Senate out there to take Barbara Boxer's place, another godless leftist.
Right.
And this godless leftist wants to be the new
Right.
senator from out there.
Yes. Yeah, and Planned Parenthood has given Kamala Harris over $81,000, and she's been friends with it now for a long time.
National Organization for Women.
Yes.
Yep. It's mind-boggling.
Right.
And, you know, we see all the things going on in the presidential elections right now, and you hear this word corruption thrown around, which anybody that hasn't seen that the American political system is corrupt until now has not been paying attention.
Not at all.
But this is a classic example of this.
Right.
This woman is trying to gain favor in California with the radical pro-abortion element, so she puts these 11 agencies to seize 4 computers and some video
Right.
and DVDs.
Yeah, and she looked at it back in July when Daleiden did the very first video. Nothing until now.
Nothing happens new.
Until something happens with office.
Right.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden she wants to be the new senator from California,
Right.
and so she's making this grandstand play,
Right.
and that's all it is.
Yeah.
No matter which side you come down on, whether he did something illegal or he didn't, or something he shouldn't have done or whatever, no matter what side of that issue you come down on, to suggest you're going to put 11 California Department of Justice agents to go bust into his home when he has actually been cooperating with the authorities out there.
Right, he has.
And why would they do this? And it's just to get on television.
That's right.
This woman is
Yeah, and Kamala Harris, she has on her website a petition for people to go to help defend Planned Parenthood.
right. Exactly.
And
Anyway. This is the height of corruption.
Yeah, it is.
And you know, ever since I was a kid, the joke around the country has always been Chicago because of some things that have happened in the past in Chicago, and you know, it was always this is a corrupt city politically and so forth. More corrupt than this? Not hardly. No way. No chances. Chicago politics any more corrupt than Los Angeles politics or California politics, or in this case, Sacramento politics. Anyway, speaking of radically corrupt, godless leftist pro-aborts, Hillary Clinton made a statement recently that's caused her a lot of grief, thankfully. Anyway, let's listen to this.
When or if does an unborn child have constitutional rights?
Well, under our laws currently, that is not something that exists. The unborn person doesn't have constitutional rights. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't do everything we possibly can in the vast majority of instances to, help a mother who is carrying a child and wants to make sure that child will be healthy, to have appropriate medical support. It doesn't mean that you don't do everything possible to try to fulfill your obligations, but it does not include sacrificing the woman's right to make decisions. And I think that's an important distinction that under Roe v. Wade we've had enshrined under our Constitution.
Okay, so now what we have is this radical pro-abort calling the unborn child a person,
Yes.
which is what we've always said it was.
That's right.
Right? But they don't have any rights, so we can kill them at will.
Right.
Right? But she's admitting they're persons
Yes, they are. Yes, she is.
because she doesn't want to have to defend an argument that they're not persons. So now the argument it is, yes, they're persons, but we can kill them if we want to.
Right.
And that's basically
Right.
her argument.
Yeah, it is. And she's saying also in that video that at the 3rd trimester, there's restrictions.
Right. What restrictions? First off, there aren't any.
Right.
But not according to Roe and Doe, the 2 cases that legalized abortion. But here's the question I'd like to be in front of her and asking, and this is where the pro-aborts in the media, she knows she can say things like this because they're not going to call her on it.
Yeah, they're not going to question her out.
But if I was sitting there and she says, well, and she's trying to appear reasonable, she says there is room for reasonable kinds of restrictions on abortion during the third trimester, I'd ask her why. First off, what happens midnight of the end of the second trimester that suddenly makes this a baby worth protecting?
Yeah.
What happens?
There's nothing.
Nothing
Nothing
happens.
happens.
She's trying to be political here,
Right.
because she knows she does not want the American people to hear her say, which is her position, that there shouldn't be any restrictions at all through any part of the pregnancy. But why, if you do believe that, if she says, no, you're lying, I think there should be restrictions in the third trimester. Okay, then why? Why should there be restrictions then and not in the second and not in the first?
Right.
You're just going to arbitrarily draw this line
Right.
at the third trimester.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's an 8-week-old gestational
Right.
or 12, 15. It doesn't matter. They're all human.
They're all human
They're
beings.
babies.
They're all human beings, and she knows that.
Yes.
And so she's painted herself into a corner here.
Yeah.
And if you're going to take that position, you say we're outrageous because we think we've taken away a woman's right to choose. And now you're saying you're taking away the woman's right to choose. Why does the woman lose her right to choose, control her bodily autonomy, if that's what you're claiming? Why does she lose it at this point?
Yeah, in the third trimester.
Right.
Yeah.
Why does she lose it then?
Well, she's upset both sides.
But the media let her off the hook. She knows good and well that if a true pro-lifer had been, or anybody that was even intellectually honest on the issue, had been sitting across from her, he would have pursued that line of reasoning.
I would hope.
The way they do with politicians who claim to be pro-life and wouldn't allow abortion for rape and incest, they nail them to the wall. They drag them through the mud. They will never do that with somebody like Hillary Clinton
No.
because they're on her side.
Right.
Speaking of more outrages, the feds now, the FDA, has changed the restrictions on the use of the abortion pill RU46. Now, this is an extremely important issue here. The manufacturer, the people who make the drug, have always said from day one, it has to be given out in 600 milligram dosages and can only be used up to 49 days in the pregnancy. That's always been their position. That's how the clinical trials were conducted in the United States. That's how the thing was approved by the FDA under those circumstances. What happened, though, immediately after RU46 was legalized, the pro-aborts knew it was not profitable if you gave it out in 600 milligram dosages and if you only used it up to 49 days. So they just ignored that. They immediately started giving it out in 200 milligram dosages because the protocol that the factory put on it, or that the manufacturer put on it, was too expensive, and it shortened their market. By going out from 49 days out, they increased the number of women they could give it to, and by cutting the dose down to 1/3, they increased the profit. Now, what you and I have seen, and we've talked about here before, is an absolute explosion
Yes.
in the number of women having incomplete abortions.
Yes.
Because if you go back to the drug manufacturers' trials on this stuff and their research on it, they said if you give it out in smaller dosages, you'll increase the chances that it doesn't work. And if you use it past 49 days,
Right.
you'll increase it.
And guess what happens then?
And guess what happens then?
That they have to do 2 abortions. I mean, not just the chemical, but then they have to go back for surgical.
Right.
Because parts of the baby are still left behind.
And you and I, we've talked about this before. Years ago, when we started our malpractice campaign, the incidence of incomplete abortions was a very small part of our total malpractice. Today, it's 95, 96% of what we get.
Right.
There has been an explosion in these problems. And what you just brought up is the central issue here. Not only did they third their cost of doing it, which increases their profit, and that they expanded the number of clients they could have by going out past 49 days. But here, let me ask you this. You say now, as we've discovered with these women, that if the chemical abortion fails, then the solution to that is to go back and do a surgical abortion.
Right.
Who pays for that?
They do.
The girl pays for it.
That's right. Yeah.
So the effect of this is, and we've dealt with a lot of these girls who've had this exact same situation. The effect of this is that to kill one baby, now they get to do 2 abortions. They get to profit off 2 abortions for each baby they kill. So they actually profit by making the pill fail.
Right. Well, in the abortion industry, they're in a panic also because of all the clinic closures. They don't know what else to do. Nothing has happened between now and several years ago when RU486 came out with the pill. It's not any stronger, and it can go out to 72 days to be given it within 72 days of the pregnancy.
And they'll push it beyond that.
Yeah.
I
Of course.
I guarantee you they will. But the fact is, again, they make a double profit. And people sometimes think, well, this is, okay, it's not a good idea, and yeah, they are making extra money, but it's not all that dangerous for the women. Women die from this.
Yes, they do.
They
Sepsis
die from
sets
this.
in.
Right.
Yeah.
They get septic infections. All kinds of things can happen that cause women to die from incomplete abortion.
Very dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
Right.
So they expose those women to that danger, and as a result of that, they make two profits. But I'm going to tell you right now, Renee, I don't think that even that is the biggest issue here. I think the biggest issue here is these new FDA guidelines pushed by the Obama administration insulates the abortion industry against medical malpractice.
That's right.
Because up until this point, let's say they did an incomplete abortion and a woman died, and the malpractice attorney could demonstrate that they gave it to her in a third dosage, or they gave it to her beyond the cutoff date that the manufacturer says, then they violated the protocol from the drug manufacturer. They're exposed to a malpractice suit. By doing this, if you look at this and you say, well, they were already doing this and the government wasn't doing anything about it, so why do they need to issue these new guidelines? There's only one reason.
Yeah.
Malpractice insulation.
Right.
Now, if they get sued, what they're going to say is, well, we're just using it according to the U.S. government's guidelines.
Right. Yeah, and they're protected.
And they're protected.
Nothing's going to happen to them.
They're insulated against malpractice.
Right.
And this is the thing that's being forgotten in this whole deal.
Yeah.
This was a play by the FDA. This was Obama administration
Yes.
saying, we're going to tie up some loose ends here before we go out of office.
Yeah.
And one of them is we're going to insulate our buddies in the abortion industry against malpractice.
Yep.
And that's what this is about.
Yeah.
So this is a boom for the abortion industry.
Oh, sure.
2 abortions to kill 1 baby.
Right.
Right?
Right.
You're insulated against malpractice. You've expanded your market, and you've increased your profits.
Yeah. And who cares about the woman?
And who cares
about
about the
her
women? Right.
physical, emotional state?
It's absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
All right, I want to talk about another issue right here because I see this misconception a lot of pro-lifers have. And recently, Donald Trump was asked about abortion, and he was saying, well, first, we need to overturn Roe versus Wade and send this back to the states. Let's make sure people understand something. That's not a pro-life position. Because if you're pro-life, you believe the unborn child is a person. The United States Constitution creates a duty to protect persons in both the 5th and 14th Amendment. So if you're saying this should go back to the states, where the right to life of these babies can be negotiated among these nitwits in the state legislatures around the country, we're going to let them negotiate the rights to the life of the baby, then you're saying that they're not persons. Because if they're persons, then the Constitution protects them. But the most important thing to understand about the overturn of Roe is not that it is overturned, but the basis upon which it's overturned. And I've got a friend of mine here that's joining us today, Michael Hirsh. Hello, Michael.
Greetings, sir.
How are you?
I am better than I deserve to be.
Oh, good. I would second that. But
Whatever it is, right?
right, whatever it is. Michael's an attorney from Georgia. He got up earlier than us this morning actually later than us. What am I
Yes.
apologizing to him for?
I got to sleep in.
You got to sleep in an extra hour. I want to give my synopsis on this, Michael, and as a learned counsel, I want you to tell me where I'm wrong, okay?
Alrighty.
I said a moment ago, and you probably heard me say that the issue is not overturning Roe, it's the mechanism by which it's overturned. For example, if the Supreme Court were to come out and say Roe was badly decided because the unborn child is a person for purposes of the Constitution, then this battle's over. We now have constitutional federal protection for the unborn because they're persons. And even Blackmun, who wrote that in his original opinion on Roe versus Wade. However, if the Supreme Court overturns Roe on what's called the silence argument, that a lot of people argue, even people on the pro-abortion side say the Constitution is silent on the abortion issue. It doesn't speak to the abortion issue. So therefore, it's a states' rights matter, so you go back to the states. if they overturn it on that basis, then you have several problems. First off, some states have already codified Roe in their state law in anticipation of this. So if it overturns, what they're saying is if the feds should overturn it on that basis and it goes back to the states, we want to have a law already in place that allows abortion. So it's already been codified in many places of the country. The second problem is because there's no prohibition against traveling from one state to the next state, then as long as there's any state in the union that allows abortions, which we already know there would be under that basis, then no baby is protected. You'd have this patchwork quilt situation, and in effect what you'd have a situation where if every baby in every state's not protected, then no baby in no state is protected. And this 50-state battle now would go on well into the future. We'd see no end to this situation. Our great-grandchildren will still be fighting this battle if it goes back to 50-state battles in each state. Where am I wrong on that, Michael?
Well, I disagree with you, sort of, and let me qualify that because it's a fairly nuanced issue. Part of the problem is that people who are typically would fall under the banner of conservative, from a prudential review standpoint, practice what is called judicial restraint. You don't go further than you have to go to rule on the law of the matter. Liberals, as we all know, don't play by any rules.
Right.
Not even when they're having their own internal squabbles like Clinton versus Sanders. So there's that problem there. But I disagree with you sort of in this regard. There's nothing in the U.S. Constitution requires each of the states to have a murder statute prohibiting murder and punishing murder. Now, as far as I know, they all do, but there's nothing in the U.S. Constitution that requires that. Compare that with the issue of slavery, which there were some states that had it, some states that didn't, and that was ruled on a national basis that, no, that is a denial of the rights of those people that were slaves. So you've got some historical precedent on both sides. Now, I agree with you that you would have a patchwork quilt, but that's what we had before Roe v. Wade, and there frankly wasn't the kind of pitched battle that you and I have been fighting for a few decades now. And there was this interstate travel where women went to states like New York that had abortion where other states didn't. And so there was still that traveling across state lines before, and I would expect that there would be again. As a conservative in my own orientation, I would tend to say, yeah, it should have been a states' rights issue, but the pro-aborts nationalized it. They weren't happy with that. They did not want it to be a states' rights issue. And so that they pushed through these fraudulent cases like Roe v. Wade, Doe v. Bolton, and some others that were put up, made up, fraudulently argued, fraudulently decided cases. So they called this party. They made it a national issue, so I think it's fair game. Fine. You chose this venue. It's a national issue, and it ought to be prohibited on a national scale. I think talking about the implications of overturning Roe v. Wade are very important. One of the things that I put on my law school application about why I wanted to be a lawyer is that I said that I was hoping that there would come a day in my own lifetime when there would be these human rights tribunals for those that practiced abortion when abortion was made illegal. I think that's also an implication that we ought not to avoid talking about or even thinking about. How do we implement these sanctions so that it's never again, as they did in the post-Nazi...
Yeah, the Nuremberg trials.
The Nuremberg war crimes tribunals, including the lesser-known ones. Number 8 was called the abortion cases because they practiced abortion on non-German, non-Aryan women. And they denied the right to life of the unborn child was part of the indictment in that case. So we have legal precedent for it being a states' rights issue, and we have, I think, a legal precedent for it being a national issue. The pro-aborts made it a national issue by pushing through Roe v. Wade.
Well, see, that's my argument, though. But that's my argument. Now that it is a national issue, I think the fact that it was a states' rights issue before 1973 is somewhat irrelevant at this point. We're talking about where we're going to be in the future, and again, I'll go back to my earlier statement. If we don't protect every baby in every state, then we don't protect any baby in any state. And I really have a problem with this argument to some degree about the personhood issue, because I don't see how you can make a distinction between a living human being and a person. And I would challenge someone to tell me the definition of a living human being who is not a person other than a fetus, which we have conveniently.
Yeah, of course I agree with that. And it would bring up all kinds, if there is a declaration from the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade that says a person's no matter how small, specifically addressing Blackmun's opening salvo in that fraudulent case of Roe v. Wade, that we leave unanswered the difficult question about when life begins. He had to start off with that false foot to get to the rest of the reasoning that he wanted to get to.
Well, first off, it's not a difficult question.
Of course not.
Every junior high school biology book tells you it begins at conception.
Right. Apparently, Justice Blackmun never opened an 8th grade biology book.
Right.
And so if we kick that pillar out from under Roe v. Wade, we don't have to leave unanswered the difficult question of when life begins anymore, even though there are some morons on the planet who think it's above their pay grade.
Right. And sometimes they become president.
I think it's a chief prerequisite.
Right.
And then, there have been other cases that I have been involved in which, if the Supreme Court did rule that an unborn child is in fact a human being, I don't think we really need them to, but if they did, then some of the other cases that you are aware of that I have fought might have had a different result.
Right.
Down in Florida, for instance, or elsewhere.
Right.
Because I can step in and protect your child that's born.
Right.
And in some circles at least, probably in Texas for the most part, anybody that would intervene to protect a born child would be hailed as a hero.
Sure.
As they would in most states.
Right.
Maybe not Massachusetts.
But anyway, this whole thing, to me, is a testament to the kind of quagmire you get into. The moment you cross this Rubicon of saying we're going to separate out one class of living human beings and say that other human beings can slaughter them at their whim if they want to.
Well, it's a moral insanity, and what you and I are trying to do is have a rational discussion around a completely irrational position.
Right.
Of this dichotomy, this made-up difference that there are some people that you can kill with impunity and there are some people that you can't.
Right.
And it certainly is analogous to the issue of slaves and how they were treated, at least in some cases.
Right.
And whether one person could own another person.
Right. Exactly.
Both are grave moral evils.
Right.
Obviously, I think the murder of an unborn child is more serious than the imprisonment, if you will.
The murder of almost 60 million of them so far.
Yes.
I mean, it's an obscenity, and I keep on telling people, the United States, and I believe we're entering, if we're not already well into, what history will look back and say is a post-Christian era in America.
I agree.
I'm sorry?
I agree with you that 1,000%.
Yeah, and this is probably the best manifestation of it. We are participating in the greatest Holocaust in the history of the world, while still ostensibly calling ourselves a Christian nation. It's mind-boggling when you think about it. But the discussion that you and I are having here, again, points up the sheer irrationality that you get into when you cross that Rubicon of saying, yes, there are living human beings. And Blackmun never denied that the unborn child are living human beings in Roe versus Wade or in Doe versus Bolton. They never denied that they're human beings. They're just not persons for the purpose of the Constitution. Once you cross that Rubicon where you can say there are living human beings on this planet who are perfectly innocent, are not even capable of having done anything to warrant their execution, but there are living human beings on this planet that we can kill simply by the fact that we label them non-persons. It's mind-boggling.
Well, it is, and I think we're soon to be seeing, if we haven't already started seeing in this country, the other end of the life spectrum with the same exact argumentation.
We are already seeing that, and
yeah.
you know, Michael, you and I think, talked about this many, many years ago. I wrote an article about this. I can't remember what I called it, but it was, we better hope and pray that God was lying to us when he said, you reap what you sow. Because a generation of Americans, primarily mine and yours, and Renee's, and even the current generation, we have killed 60 million of our offspring because they're inconvenient, expensive, and unhealthy. Well, guess what? The people that started this are now entering the stage of their life where they're inconvenient, unhealthy, and expensive. Right?
Good point.
That's right.
And the generation that we killed off a third of or a quarter of is now going to be making decisions about us, about our lifespans.
That's right. It's already happening, as you noted.
It's already happening. Again, we better hope that God was just kind of jerking us around when he said, you reap what you sow.
That's even more tenuous than hoping you win the lottery.
Right. Yeah, I know. That's my point, because he wasn't lying to us. He was telling us exactly what was going to happen, and I think we're already starting to see the ramifications of this. I saw a thing the other day, some Scandinavian country, where in these countries, they've been post-Christian longer than we have, so they're kind of a stalking horse for us. They're telling us where we're headed, right? Yep. And they're now saying that when people are terminal, we should keep them alive a little bit longer so we can harvest their organs. Even if we're going to euthanize them, let's keep their hearts beating so we can harvest their organs. And we look at that and we're horrified by it. But I will point out that if you look at these states like that, when I say states, I mean governments like that, there's nothing that they've ever done that we haven't eventually done. So that's our future. We'll be going down that same trail. Well, anyway, Michael, we're out of time. I appreciate you being on with us, and it's always fun talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm sure we'll have you back again. Thanks for joining us.
Take care.
Bye-bye. What do you think?
I don't know what to think.
It is mind-boggling.
It is mind-boggling.
When
yeah.
you start putting it all into context and looking at it and saying, really?
Right.
You know, and how you resolve these things in a moral fashion, you can't, because you started out with an immoral premise to begin with.
Right.
And so now we get into this quagmire, and it's like working a Rubik's Cube in the dark with boxing gloves on.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to work.
Right.
I mean, and that's where we are. Yeah. And this debate here, that even two people who are on the same side can look at, like Michael and I, can look at this thing and see different perspectives on it. It's scary. Yeah. It really is. And where we're headed in this country. And again, to say that we're not in a post-Christian era, I think is indefensible. I don't think you can defend that position. Right. Anyway, thanks, Renee.
Thanks.
That's all the time we have. And remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how this killing will stop.